All right, well, my first and short piece is called Hydropower. A few weeks ago, I shed my shirt and my shoes, stood on the edge of Utah's Green River, and breathed, calming myself before diving into the swift current and kicking my way into the flow. Water has always been able to remind me of the smallness of my existence. To submerge, for me, has always been an act of absolute surrender, an act which demands the admittance of my ultimate inferiority. In water, I find both my greatest fear and my greatest humility. And my longer piece is called Re-Evaluation. And it goes like this. The Desert Tortoise Preserve Committee, Incorporated, based out of Riverside, California, wants to save the desert tortoise. In the face of proposed large-scale solar projects that would level its habitat, the animal's future is looking increasingly bleak. So the committee is fighting hard. And they're not alone. They represent a crowd of conservationists trying to find some alternative to the destruction of habitat in the name of clean energy, a crowd that embodies well a value set not uncommon among environmental activists. When opposing the solar installations, they argue that animals hold value independent of people, and that people have an obligation to allow animals to live undisturbed. This concept inspires much of the environmental work conducted today. It underlies, among many more, the principles upon which the pivotal Endangered Species Act was founded, as well as the conceptual basis for the influential organizations, the Center for Biological Diversity, and Defenders of Wildlife. There are two arguments that people typically employ when opposing habitat destruction. The one used by the Desert Tortoise Preserve Committee is the first. The second is based on the idea that certain animals hold value because they support human sustenance and progress. Where the first puts value in animals, this second puts value in people. It is a concept that can be seen when state wildlife management departments define wild animals as game, as well as when people argue that beaver ought to be reintroduced to an area as a means of regularizing late-season flows for farmers. Here we have, then, two reasons for the protection of an animal. The first, the Desert Tortoise Preserve Committee, based on the animal, and the second, in which we bag wild game, based on what the animal provides for the person. So why does this matter? In the environmental world, the two mentalities accomplish the same thing, invoke either in a debate and you are arguing for species conservation. To argue for a creature using the first value set, though, that of existential value, is to make an all-encompassing statement about what it means to be an animal in a human's world. Under the title of this altruistic conservationist, a person cannot advocate for the perpetuation of some animals but not others, for into the very basis of the argument is infused universality. Existential value is based on, appropriately, existence, a quality which does not differ between individuals or species. So, under their altruistic conservationist stance, the Desert Tortoise Preserve Committee cannot support any project that will further imperil the tortoise, as such developments almost ubiquitously will in the Mojave, so they oppose, in all cases, on all grounds, where the tortoise roams. With the first approach, there is no flexibility. The alternative, then, is selective conservation. Wearing the hat of anthropocentric conservationist, a person has the freedom to assess how relatively important the actions are that would endanger the animal, instead of simply opposing them across the board. Such a person in the tortoise situation would be more willing to consider the solar project, given their flexible philosophy. Approach 2 asks, which matters more, the developments or the services that the animals provide? To adopt the philosophy of the altruistic conservationist is, almost by definition, much more benevolent. What more humane action is there than opting to spare the life of another being when given the opportunity to take it? But this valued compassion must be weighed against the progress that would be lost. Interestingly, we can see that for the sake of food production, culture has yielded a precedent by which killing an animal is acceptable, as long as it is subsequently eaten and, at least historically, as long as the animal is shown basic respect while living. While precedent should not necessarily be taken as moral guide, this does introduce a compromise worthy of consideration, that of the respectful and grateful taking of life. With this in mind, might it be possible to call oneself an altruistic conservationist, that is, value the lives of animals, but approach problems with the flexibility and openness of an anthropocentric conservationist, that is, be willing to kill them? Interestingly, in the case of the tortoise, we are risking not only the lives of a few individuals, but the existence of a species. Chances are high that this animal will go extinct if these solar installations go in, and some would say that that changes the whole picture. But really, what's the difference between killing an individual and killing a species? Ecological service? Perhaps. Magnitude? Certainly. The distinction would be significant if what we were fighting wasn't climate change, but it is. Today marks the first time that climate change is what we must progress against, and with it comes an urgency not previously known. To me, it seems detrimental that in the face of a problem that is changing the world permanently, that is vaulting us into a whole new natural system, there are people who oppose progressive developments on a basis of animal protection. To not kill an animal for an otherwise perfect solar installation means giving up that much more of the future to climate change. And what's more, in the face of climate change, the choice is no longer between anthropocentric and altruistic conservation. It is between acting in the long-term interest of everything or of nothing. We must act prudently and reverently, but we must act rationally and with the interest of everything in mind. Here is climate change. What will we not do to stop it?